Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Goblin Kwain, and tonight we're going to read some first-hand paranormal experiences, and they come from a website called Liminal Earth. And what this website is people submit their real paranormal experiences, whether it's ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, fairies, high strangeness, anything out of the ordinary, anomalous, whatever. And then they also tag the location that it happened. So that you can find it on Google Maps, so you can actually see where it took place, which is very interesting. And the stories we're going to read tonight, a lot of times I like to categorize the stories that we read according to a theme or something. But tonight it's just going to be miscellaneous. A mixed bag, all kinds of different strange things. So, I'll read the stories, and if you're watching, I'll also do the Google Maps street view of the location that they gave for these experiences. So if all that sounds good to you, if that sounds interesting and fun, let's get started. Our first story we are going to read tonight is called Mysterious Fortune. And it's categorized as high weirdness and straight up ghosts. I didn't mention this earlier, so let me explain that now. They do have categorizations you can choose for your stories. I'm guessing the person who submits them chooses the category, but I'm not sure. But these categories are high weirdness, straight up ghosts, strange animals, thin places, dark forces, time distortions, mythologies, cryptoids, and classic UFO. Now, I have done videos dedicated solely to the thin places, high weirdness, and straight up ghost categories. But I also have videos where it's just kind of miscellaneous. Anyway, this story is categorized as high weirdness and straight up ghosts. I was in high school, or perhaps it was the summer I graduated. I was out and about in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts. I lived in a small town just outside it at the time. I was with my buddy Tommy in a beat-up '87 Mustang convertible and wanted to get a cup of coffee at the coffee shop I had taken a liking to. But Tommy didn't like the place so much, so we compromised and went to a local bookstore that had a restaurant/cafe inside. This was the Tatnuck Bookseller, which has long since closed. As we approached the bookshop, an old woman addressed me. She had roughly a dozen plastic shopping bags spread around her that she'd been rifling through. She asked me for a cigarette, and when I made eye contact with her, I got the impression she was blind. Her eyes were almost entirely cataract, all clouded and misty, and it seemed that she looked through me rather than at me. She explained that she had just bought a pack, but couldn't find it, that she must have dropped it somewhere, so I gave her one and went inside. I puzzled for a moment how she pegged me as a smoker, because I didn't have one lit when I saw her, but shook it off. When we got into the cafe, it was clear that they were closing up for the night, and we decided not to keep the waitstaff on just so we could order coffee. So we went back out, and the woman was still there. This time, she asked for a ride to the pharmacy down the street, where she had just come from with her dozen or so cumbersome shopping bags. The doctor told me I should walk, she said. Physical therapy, I was hit by a car last year, and I need to build up strength, but I'm so tired. So of course, I obliged. Tommy had to get into the back of my tiny car, and she, with her burden of bags, got into the front. As we rolled towards the street, she made a remark about the two of us being musicians. "How'd you guess?" I asked, and she said that she just knows things. I asked if she was psychic, and she said she was known to be. She explained that she read tarot, and I told her that I had just started learning it myself. In fact, I got my first deck at that same bookstore. So she offered me a reading, which was no small task inside a tiny convertible. But we pulled up under the street lamp at the edge of the pharmacy parking lot, and she produced a deck of cards wrapped in an ornate cloth, with an honest-to-goodness crystal ball, and proceeded to read my fortune. I don't remember all of the details, and Tommy was barely paying attention, being a skeptic. She did say that she saw a pregnancy in the cards, which was terrifying to me. She insisted there was a blonde woman in my life that was a romantic interest, and I was baffled. My girlfriend at the time was of Egyptian descent, so very far from blonde. At any rate, when the reading was done, she scooped up her ephemera and got out of the car, taking her bags out one by one. The last bag was full of fresh cherries, and she offered me a few. I took them, and she took the bag. Tommy moved to the front, and she bent to pick up her purchases, and that was the last I saw of her. I was stymied by the reading, a bit befuddled, and as I ate the cherries, I tried to run over what she had told me with my friend. But he was distracted by the fact that after bending for the bags, she never reappeared. Only a minute or so had passed, so I got out of the car and looked around, a fairly large parking lot. Nowhere she could have gone to, even if she could move very quickly. But with her age and burdensome load she was carrying, there was little chance of that. Her name was Clara, and I'm left with the conclusion that perhaps she didn't survive being hit by a car. As a capstone to the story, being as shaken up by the reading as I was, I maintained little to no contact with my then-girlfriend. The next time I saw her was a week later, at a party for Independence Day. Unbeknownst to me, she had bleached her hair and was totally blonde. I found that there was something very cozy about this story. Maybe it's the bookshop. Oh, I really miss bookstores with cafes inside. Now, I mean, at least around me, there is still Barnes & Noble, and now they have Starbucks inside, but it's just not the same. They just don't make them like they used to. There used to just be this lovely coziness about old bookstores to me. Get a cup of coffee, find a comfy armchair. There's some soft sort of jazz playing in the background, and just grab a table, pile full of books, look through them, maybe buy some, maybe just read them. I also used to like that you could go, maybe you still can, I don't know. You used to be able to go and listen, like scan CDs and listen to the CDs. And that was how I would pick out all my music back in the day. Spent hours doing that at the bookstores. Anyway, the bookstore was a very nostalgic setting for me in this story. They mentioned in the story about the old woman that she asked for a cigarette, and the author of the story thought it was strange how the woman pegged them for a smoker. But I don't know. I've found that people will ask you for a cigarette whether you have one or not, right? You know, some people will just ask anyone who comes by for a cigarette. So I don't know if we can attribute that to any of her psychic powers. The tarot deck. They said that she kept her tarot deck wrapped in an ornate cloth. And I do as well. I mean, you have to, right? If you're really serious about it. I don't have a crystal ball, though. I wish I did. Finally, I thought it was funny that the woman's name was Clara, because I thought Clara the Clairvoyant. What a perfect name. So, what do you think? Was this woman a ghost? Did she not survive her car accident, or was she just an eccentric older woman, as I hope to one day be? But it was a great story. I thought there was a great atmosphere to it. Sounds like a very interesting encounter that I don't blame them for holding on to. Wow, and I also didn't say at the top of the story where this took place, but luckily for me, they did. And that would be Worcester, Massachusetts. Again, I really hope I'm saying that right. I'm just saying what I think is right, but it's always a scary place to pronounce. But I do like to, of course, tell you where the story takes place. And our next story takes place in Bridgeport, New York, in the summer of 2018. It's called Piercing Green Eyes. And its categories are listed as dark forces, straight up ghosts, again, visions, dreams, etc. That's not a category I've explored much, but I'd like to. Anyway, let's get into this story. My friends and I have seen a lot of weird things growing up in Bridgeport, but this has to be the weirdest. My good friend Zach was walking down a road we call the Horseshoe with our other friend Sebastian at night, when at the end of the road, Zach noticed a black figure, tall as the trees, with what he described as piercing green eyes. He said as soon as he looked into its eyes, he felt an insane surge of electricity run through his body, and he was stuck to where he was standing. Sebastian pulled Zach away, and they ran down the road back to Sebastian's house. What makes this story even freakier is our other friend John, who lives 2 houses down from Zach, and Sebastian, had an eerie similar dream to what happened to Zach. We were all at my house talking about weird experiences when Zach talked about the experience I just relayed, and then John decided to tell us about his dream. In the dream, he's on the horseshoe, but a black and white version of it. On the tip of the horseshoe, there's a log cabin house. In real life, the house has a little wooden fence around it and some cameras for security. But John said in his dream, the house had barbed wire fences, and the windows were barred with tons of cameras everywhere. He walked up to the house, held the fence, and looked into the windows where the same piercing green eyes my friend Zach described seeing came up through the windows of the cabin house. And John said the fence started to electrocute him. They had never talked to each other about these experiences before, but to me they lived too close and the experiences were too similar. It's impossible to me that they aren't related to the same spirit or entity. So this story was pretty brief and simple, but I don't know, I was just kind of struck by this being that was tall as the trees and just the parallels between the real-life experience and the dream experience had by 2 different people. As far as the dream, they said that the neighborhood, the street they were on, was a black and white version. And I don't think I've ever had a black and white dream. I've had a lot of really, really strange dreams, but I can't remember ever having a black and white dream. And the details about the neighborhood and the house interest me because it's, it's kind of this dream logic where, when you're in real places and dreams, they resemble the real place, but some things are different. Sometimes they're totally different, but you still just kind of know where you're supposed to be. Do you ever have this in your dreams? You know what I'm talking about. They look slightly different. In this case, the house in the dream was slightly exaggerated, I would say, from the real life house. Instead of having some cameras, it had tons of cameras. Instead of having a little wooden fence, it had a barbed wire electric fence. I'll have this a lot where you're in a place, a familiar place, but it just looks slightly different. Or for me, sometimes the spatial qualities are different. Like it'll be a familiar house or store, but it's huge on the inside. Yeah, I don't know. I'm fascinated by dreams and dream logic. And as to what this entity actually was, the entity with the piercing green eyes, I don't know. I don't know if it actually was the same entity that they both saw, but the eyes had a lasting effect on both of their memories. It was a detail that stuck out to both of them. This house, this neighborhood location is near a lake, and sounds like it's somewhat wooded as well, so maybe it's tied to the lands or the elements in some way. All right, this next one is weird, man. There's not really that much of a story to it. It's really kind of more based around a picture, but I think you'll see why I included it. So it's just called Doom Sign, and the description is, this takes place in Ballard, I think Seattle? Let me see. Yeah, okay, Seattle. Ballard is a neighborhood in Seattle, I guess. A lot of entries are from Seattle. I'm pretty sure Liminal Earth is based in Seattle. Anyway, the description says, a very official-looking street sign reading, "Why is this happening? Report plague info." And then it gives a number. Stood here for some time. So, if you aren't watching, if you're just listening or whatever it may be, there's a photo attached, and it's of a light pole on a busy street, and one of those poles where you would see a bunch of flyers, maybe stapled to lost dog signs, that kind of thing. But it's a metal sign that says, "Why is this happening? Report plague info," with a number. I have not called the number. Maybe I will. We'll see. So maybe that doesn't sound that interesting. We recently, 3 years ago at the time of this recording, but it still feels very recent, went through a plague of our own, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. So, maybe it seems like it's related to that, whether it's in a satirical or official way, although this doesn't really seem like an official sign, right? But what's interesting is that this was posted in June of 2018. I don't know, that struck me just because obviously, I don't really think there was any sort of plague going on at that time. And it's a sign that would resonate a lot more heavily in 2020 or the year or so after that. And also, the category that was chosen for this story was time distortions. I thought that was weird too. If you think of it in that way, as a time distortion of kind of like a foreboding, you know what I mean? You could really go down the rabbit hole with that. It was if a time traveler, and it was submitted by a user named Time Scanner. It's just weird. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's not related. I can't honestly suppose that there's some sort of time travel message relating to the COVID-19 pandemic having to do with the sign, but I just thought it was odd. It's an odd sign on its own. Why is this happening? Report plague info, blah, blah, blah. And so when I saw this picture, I was definitely expecting it to be from 2020 and just be a COVID-related thing, but it's not. And you know what? I didn't think about it before, but I'll call the number. Let me call this number here, the report plague info. Let's see what happens.
We could not complete your call. Please try again.
Okay, so I called it, but it's not a number that seems to be in service or anything. It just said, we could not complete your call. Please try again. And then it hung up. So no answers there. Our next story is called Casa de Cultura and takes place in Colima, Mexico. The stories occur between 1992 and 1998. And they have thrown just about every category on this story, so we're hitting them all. So let's get started. The city and state of Colima are definitely places of high weirdness, and I think that many parts of it can be considered thin places due to the number of stories that abound here. Some say that it is due to the proximity of the volcanoes, the snow volcano, dormant, and the fire volcano, still active. Some say that there are strong energetic areas, both in the city and up towards the volcano, where strange energies can be felt and sometimes even seen in action. The state of Colima has stories ranging from ghosts to UFOs, to time distortions to witchcraft, to energy vectors, you name it. It is a place where the ocean, volcanoes, and small forgotten towns meet. Until the early 1900s, Colima was pretty much isolated from the rest of the country because of the rugged terrain that surrounded it. Mountains, volcanoes, cliffs, etc. But was constantly visited by Europeans and Asians that arrived on its shores by way of the Pacific Ocean. The indigenous communities that lived around the volcano were pretty much left alone until almost the end of the conquest of Mexico. Colima is a very fertile land, and to this day there are many areas that are thick with forest and jungle-like canopy. Despite being the smallest state in Mexico, there's much to explore. Such exuberance gives the place much earth and plant energy. Everything is alive. This story is a bit of a mix because I was witness to so many different things that happened in one small square of the city. I'm talking about the campus in which the House of Culture and Cultural Center are located. This campus is made up of a library, a theater, the main office building, a parking lot, an outdoor amphitheater, and a 5-story building where the arts and crafts workshops are offered. There's also a small theater for monologues, and some dance and music rooms, classes. At the very top of the building is a local TV channel. Already, the fact that the channel is there, with its huge antennas, might be a reason as to why so many things happen in that building alone. Another interesting fact is that the campus is situated right in front of a military zone, a place where high-ranking military live and work and teach and practice, etc. Another interesting thing to note is that, not surprisingly, Both of these places were built upon an area of land that at some point was part of a cemetery. The cemetery was actually moved several times. And finally, to top it off, they are situated on a long avenue that was once entrance to the city. The avenue is decorated with huge trees on either side of the street, which are more than 100 years old. It is historically known that these trees were used as hanging trees during the Revolution and the Cristero War, meaning that many people were hung from these trees. It is a well-known story told by many of the soldiers that live in the military zone that on rainy nights they have seen the bodies of the hanged swaying from the trees. Another thing I forgot to mention is that the city was built around and upon many rivers and streams. Some are still visible today, and other waterways are buried under the city buildings. Rumor had it that this building, where the TV channel was located, was home to some sort of creature that by description might be a dwarf or an elf or something to that nature. One of the night watchmen would tell us stories about how this little creature, about the size of a 5-year-old child, would wait until all the lights were off and then would make its way from the very top of the building to the very bottom, making sure not to be seen, sneaking his way down. The guard would tell us about how he, too, would hide in a corner of the building and watch as the little guy went up and down 2 or 3 times in one night. We didn't really believe the story until one evening when my husband had an event in one of the classrooms. He was busy working the lights and such for the event, and while he was busy, he noticed a child walking among the small crowd of people. He found it odd that this child was alone, and was dressed as if he were Santa's helper. After a while, the child apparently disappeared. I mentioned the thing earlier about the rivers and streams because, in Colima, it is said that these little people are attracted to water and are usually found near the rivers and streams around the city. In that same building, there were stories about the bathroom on the lower floor being haunted. The doors to the stalls would open and close on their own. Toilets would flush, sinks would fill with water, and so on. I went to those bathrooms just once in the 12 years that I worked there and never went back. As soon as I stepped in, I felt I was not alone. My hair stood up and I could feel a presence almost breathing on me. I peed with the door wide open and left as quickly as I could. Right in front of the bathroom is a dance room where the dancers have class and practice. I took a yoga class once, and during the entire class, I felt a creepy sensation and was scared to look at myself in the mirror for fear of seeing something else there. There was also a story about a creature that resembled a wild boar. This creature was seen, felt, or heard by 3 of the night guards on different occasions and in different ways, but they all agreed that this was the same creature. It was seen in the small theater where the guard usually had their midnight snooze. One of the most vivid stories that I heard from one of the guards was that one night, while he slept on a couch in that theater, he began to feel like he was short of breath and that his chest was caving in. As he woke up, he felt as if a pair of claws were digging into his sides. He opened his eyes to find a pig sitting on his chest, his eyes glowing red. He wrestled with the creature until he was able to throw it off of him, and he watched as it turned into a dark shadow and hid itself behind a drywall. On a sad note, one of the security guards, a friend of mine, and the man that shared most of these stories with me, passed away inside that theater. It seemed he had a stroke and didn't make it to the door. He was found dead, his body blocking the door. I often wonder if it was the boar that got him, or maybe the elf, or maybe something more sinister. That's not all I have to say about Colima. Stay tuned. Well, they had quite a lot to say about Colima already, and they do have another story posted on Liminal Earth, but I'll save that for another time. At the beginning, they mentioned 2 volcanoes, the volcano of snow, which is dormant, and the volcano of fire, which is the most active volcano in Mexico. Cities and towns near the volcano, such as Colima, are required to be in a constant state of alert in preparation for a possible major eruption that would require evacuation. So having volcanoes nearby, especially an active one, has to have some effect on the energy and otherworldly activity of the area, or so you think, I'd think. Lots of interesting stories in that one. Elves, ghost boars, definitely an intriguing location. And seems like one that we will potentially visit again. Our final story of the night takes place in Tip City, Ohio, and took place in 1998. It's called High Weirdness Home and Cemetery. And by the title, of course, it's no surprise that one of the categories is high weirdness. Also, it is categorized as straight up ghosts, strange animals, and visions and dreams. The house I lived in from birth until about age 10 had a cemetery on its property. While there was one recent grave from the Vietnam War, almost all the rest dated back much further, from between the late 1800s to the early 1900s. For as long as I can remember, I felt presences within the house and spent a good amount of time in the graveyard. While I never saw any physical apparitions there, I always knew that I was never alone, although I always felt very comfortable with whatever I sensed around me. The home also had several acres of forest, and on numerous occasions I would see white animals watching me from just inside the tree lines. Several times it was a very large, long-haired dog, and another time it was a deer, but the animals would always be pure white and simply standing there motionless, looking towards me or the house for a few moments before they would suddenly be gone. While living here, I also had several dreams where I was visited by a being that appeared like a young boy around my age. We never spoke that I can remember, but twice when I saw him, he gave me an item that I then went on to actually receive in the physical world, both times through my grandmother. This first was an antique Polaroid camera, and the second was a necklace. After my family moved, I never dreamt of this being again. I don't know about you, but I have always been the person who wished I lived near a cemetery, or even in a cemetery. That'd be great. Make me the caretaker. I'll do it. The white animals were striking and strange. A white dog, I guess, isn't too strange to see, but a white deer has to be pretty rare if it was actually a physical deer. We have talked about white dogs and white deer before. I can't remember I believe the white deer was a Liminal Earth video, but I can't remember which one. But white dogs have come up in the haunted hiking video I did. Symbolically, white animals tend to symbolize protectors, I think, kind of protection spirits. And both of these animals they saw were just kind of watching and observing, so maybe that's what they were doing. Maybe they were protecting this person, or maybe they were protecting the area. Again, these dreams are very interesting to me. Getting the items in the dream in itself is interesting, but the fact that both of the items actually came into their life, they dreamt about them and then they received them later on in life. Very cool. And both times from the grandmother, so it'd be interesting to know if, I don't know, maybe this boy in their dream had some sort of connection with their grandmother, or maybe it's a family member. Very cool. Very, very cool stuff. So yeah, just kind of a hodgepodge, mixed bag of stories tonight. And these are ones I just picked out and found to be interesting. Didn't feel like categorizing like I normally do. Just thought I would pick some interesting mixed bag. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I always have fun with these. I really like looking through this website, Liminal Earth. As I mentioned, I do have a playlist of videos reading stories and going through the locations while I read the stories from this website. So you can definitely check that out if you want to hear more of those, and there will be more to come. If you have any of those subcategories that interest you, let me know. So, for now, I hope you have a cozy evening. If it's wintertime, like it is now when I'm recording this, stay warm, bundle up, snuggle up, and I'll see you all next time.